15 people who are admitted according to a criteria. So they said, look, this poor guy who had been one of the biggest donors of the hospital, he took his mother there and they said, I'm afraid she's 5 years above the limit, so we can't take her in. So there's me, the founder of the hospital, the chairman of the board of governors. I call up the chief executive, I said, look, please make this exception, because here's this, he's such a big donor of the hospital and it's his mother. They said, we will have a meeting. They had a meeting and they rejected my offer. They rejected my siparish. So that's what you mean by rule of law. When it doesn't matter who says anything, the institution follows its laws. And so in Pakistan, the moment the same law applies to the Prime Minister as it applies to the poorest man, that is revolution number one. Number two, you need an education emergency in Pakistan. No nation can progress without education, without educating themselves. You have to invest in your human beings. The biggest capital is human capital. Germany gets destroyed twice last century in First World War and Second World War. It again came out because the investment was in the human beings. So we need to have an education emergency, and that is the second big priority we have. And thirdly, we need to get out of this war on terror. It's destroying Pakistan. It is increasing fanaticism in Pakistan. If this war was against extremism, there is more extremism in Pakistan than ever in our history today. People like us have to think 10 times before we make a statement. Such is the number of extremists in Pakistan. So therefore, we need to distance ourselves from the war, mobilize the people of the tribal areas to take care of the militants of Taliban, and bring the Pakistan army back, because the Pakistan army cannot win the war. It is in fact causing more militants because of collateral damage. So we need to work through. Remember, you win the war on terror when you win the people from within whom the terrorists are operating from. If you win them over, you win the hearts and minds, you win the war. You don't win the war through bombs.
Can you hear me? I'd like to ask you, if PTI wins and you come to power, would you move to remove the anti-empathy ordinance and the amendment from the Constitution? Second question, do you endorse the Jirga system?
The first question, I have to be honest, I cannot answer. Because given the situation in Pakistan, I'm afraid it's a question which could risk lives of people in my party. So, but let me just answer you this. Let me just say one thing. We will insist on rule of law, and rule of law means every citizen is equal before the law. So don't push me into specifics, because there are certain things I understand and certain ground realities at the moment I know, So let me go on. Second, Jirga system. Let me make you understand. What is the Jirga system? Jirga means, or panchayat. This was the old local government system which existed in the subcontinent for centuries. The British, when they came, they changed that system and centralized it. As Jawaharlal Nehru writes in his book, India Wins Freedom, he talks about self-sustained village communities that used to exist before. So what did the Jirga do, or the panchayat do? They did two things. Panchayat was the name of a village council. So if we are embarrassed about using the word Jirga, we can call them village councils. And secondly, there used to be the village jury system. Jirga or Panchayat were also the jury system of a village. So therefore, if a poor man, there was some injustice done in the village, then immediately he would go in front of the village jury, which could be Panchayat or the Jirga, and he would get instant justice. Today, since this new system, this old, or the British system has come in, the poor people have been deprived of justice in Pakistan. So 60% of people in jails in Pakistan, according to the Deputy Inspector General of Jails, in a seminar, he said 60% of jail inmates are innocent. The crime is that they are too poor to afford lawyers. So you have to, if you want to give justice, if you want to empower the village communities, you will have to give them the power to make their own decisions, spend their development funds, run their own schools, run their own dispensaries, and also dispense justice in certain cases to the poor people, and most of the cases are land cases. Remember, 60% of cases in Pakistan are land disputes, and the courts are clogged by land disputes. So in village level, if you sort out these land disputes at the village level, where everyone knows whose land belongs to whom, and everyone knows who the witnesses are. Therefore, this is the old system. In India, they've already started. They're called Panchayat Raj, where they've again taken back power back to the communities. And just to finally, the great Akhtar Hamid Khan in the Orangi pilot projects proved that if you empower even the Kachi Bastis, even Shanti towns, if you empower them, they can raise their standard of living. So it's a question of empowering them. So Jirga Panchayat, if you don't want to call them village councils, call them village jury system, but you need to empower the people at the village level.
मेरा नाम मसरूर जावेद है। मैं एडिटर हूँ अफसरोज़ा शोहरत का जो लॉस एंजलिस से शाया होता है, और शोहरत वाहिद अखबार है जो अमेरिका के अलावा लाहौर, कराची और इस्लामाबाद से रोज़ाना शाया होता है। मेरा सवाल ये है कि आज आपकी एक अहम रहनुमा शीरी मदारी ने मुस्ताफ़ी होने के बाद आप पर कुछ एलिगेशन लगाए। ये बहुत अच्छा प्लेटफॉर्म है कि आप उनकी वजाहत कर सकें। ये जो आपकी पार्टी में टूट हो रही है, और उन्होंने कहा है कि आप जो है वो पुराने सियासतदानों के नर्दे में फंस गए, क्या ये बात दुरुस्त है?
देखिए, सीधी बात है कि एक पॉलिटिकल पार्टी कोई दरवाजे बंद नहीं कर देती अपने कि जनाब ये आप आ सकते हैं, आप नो ऑब्जेक्शन सर्टिफिकेट लेके आ सकते हैं, आप नहीं आ सकते। कोई एनजीओ तो नहीं है, पॉलिटिकल पार्टी है, इसमें कोई भी आ सकता है। लेकिन इनकी जो एलिगेशन है कि हम पुराने सियासतदानों को या जो स्टेटस को के सियासतदान है उनको ऊपर लेके आ रहे हैं, वो बिल्कुल अनफाउंडेड है, इसलिए कि पार्टी इलेक्शंस करवा रही है। तो इस पार्टी के अंदर तो इलेक्शंस होने जा रहे हैं, तो जो लोग इलेक्ट करेंगे वो इवेंचुअली सारे अहदेदार बन जाएंगे। एक बहुत बड़ी वजह लोग इसलिए जा रहे हैं क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि उन्होंने इलेक्ट नहीं होना, इसलिए छोड़ के जा रहे हैं।
You've been my hero in cricket, and you, I'm sure, be the hero in politics as well. I'm ex-major from Pakistan Army, Hasan Shah. And my question to you is that I have served in Waziristan Scouts, and I know how Ziaul Haq introduced the cancer of Taliban in Pakistan. And that cancer is growing tremendously. I want to know what remedies do you have to control that cancer? I know you built a very big hospital, cancer hospital, but what about this cancer that is Taliban?
Okay. So since I wrote a book on the tribal areas 20 years ago called The Warrior Race, I'm probably the only politician who's been all over the tribal areas. I've read the history. My mother's ancestors came from Waziristan, Kaniguram, or Barki tribes. So that's why I got invited, and that's how I discovered the tribal area. And that's why I was the first politician when in 2004 Musharraf was sending the Pakistan army there. I stood up in parliament and said, this is the biggest blunder that is going to be committed by the Pakistan army. Because all they had to do was read the British history of tribal areas, the 80-year interaction of the British. They would never have done this stupidity. This was the biggest blunder made. Now, what is the Taliban? If it is an ideological Taliban, which you are saying, means that there are some Taliban indoctrinated who want to impose a Sharia through the barrel of the gun, then this Taliban should have been in power between 96 and 2001 when they were in power in Afghanistan. But there were no militant Taliban in Pakistan. Even when Taliban were in power in Afghanistan, Pakistan had no militant Taliban. Pakistan Army went in 2004 in Waziristan. It took 2 years of collateral damage to produce what became known as the Pakistani Taliban. So my contention is that the ideological Taliban is a small proportion of the militants. I think that they are not even 5%. The majority of people fighting are either Pashtun nationalists who've always resisted foreigners. If you look back in the history, every foreigner has been resisted in this area. The Pashtun is the most xenophobic lot. They fight each other, but when a foreigner comes, they all get together. And so therefore, they have fought every. Why would they, if they fought the British, they fought the Russians, they fought the Mughals? For 62 years, nobody even knows this. This whole area fought the Mughals for 62 years. So why would they not fight the Americans? We might convince ourselves that they're the good guys, but it's who the fighters think of them. So therefore, the Pashtun nationalists, or the Pashtun nationalism, and then the old jihadi organizations which were trained in the 80s, which were controlled by the establishment, which then turned against the establishment and became the Punjabi Taliban, then they're criminals. The whole area is devastated. There's no the old trade, everything is finished there. So a lot of unemployed people have picked up the gun and they call themselves Taliban. And the biggest trade, the only business in that whole area is kidnapping for ransom. So they also call themselves Taliban. So if you want to win the war, the only way is to you, first of all, disengage from the US war. Because as long as they can indoctrinate people that this is jihad, martyrdom, the suicide bomber does the maximum damage. To take away the motivation from the suicide bomber, we must disengage from the jihad. The moment we do that, this will become the moment the suicide bomber goes, this can be contained. And the ideological Taliban will be isolated by the people of tribal area. So the key to peace lies with the people of the tribal area, not with the Pakistan Army. Hence the Waziristan Peace March was the first attempt by a political party to engage with the people of Waziristan. And if you see, if you ask Salman Ahmed, because he was with me and Fawzia Kasuri, the welcome we got in Tank by the Masood tribe was historic. And this is the way to go. To win the war, win the people to your side, you win the war.
Next question from the top first balcony, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Captain Imran. I have two questions for you. The first one is, do you really believe that the elections are going to be clean? I mean, Shaf or Safaf honge, keeping in mind that these are going to be under the current government, which is, PVP and Asif Zardari, and there's a lot of corruption. So, as your team, I'm basically very scared that there will be a lot of corruption even in the elections. So we are very confident that you will win, but we have to take care of the corruption, which itself is a big problem right now, which is going to basically affect the elections itself. So even if we come out to vote and there is corruption, I mean, it's actually zero. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Okay. Should I look? How can there be clean elections under Asif Zardari? Clean elections.